Thanks, Sharon. So I am going to talk about the future of water in Arizona. Some of the things you'll see in my presentation are things that are still very much a work in progress. They are somewhat controversial, but I will tell you this, that Governor Doug Ducey has made water one of his priorities since the first day he took office. He has given numerous speeches about water. We have meetings on a regular basis with the Chief of Staff about water. And I will say we have, and we will continue to work on these difficult water issues for the next 4 years, 9 months, and 4 days, if I have my math right, and if a certain election in November goes the way I hope it will. Just to make the point that we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop because of controversy. We're not going to stop because it's difficult. And I think in discussions with many of you folks who are out in the audience, that is what I believe you all want and expect from the Department of Water Resources. So just quick background, you can see the sources of water in the state, 41% groundwater, 18% surface water, 38% more recently Colorado River water, and 3% reclaimed water. The drought map, dark colors are bad, most of the states in drought. We have challenges, the driving forces being, again, our drought since 1998, population and economic growth. Short-term, medium-term, long-term risks, essentially Colorado River groundwater, and our growing supply and demand imbalance that we expect from our growth. I think it was Kevin Moran that might have alluded to this earlier, the probability of shortage in 2020 being close to 50%. Most importantly, this is a January probability table, January 2018. The prior iteration of this table was in August of 2017. The next iteration will be in mid to late April of this year. Most importantly, all these numbers are going up. The trend is up, that's bad. Look in the lower right-hand corner, the probability of Lake Mead going to 1025, a draconian level in Lake Mead, is 5%. We don't want to see any numbers in that column. 5% is not a terrible thing. It was up a little higher before we had the good year in 2016, but it certainly did not solve the problem. What's an even more telling slide, and I'll take some time to go through this one. So this is the risk of Lake Mead, again, reaching that elevation of 1025. And it starts out, you can see, in 2008, right after the 2007 shortage sharing guidelines were put into place. And that gray line along the bottom is the probability of the lake hitting that level through 2026, which is dependency of the guidelines. They expire then. And you can see that it was single digits, around 7 or 8%. You fast forward to 2018, and that single digit, that gray line, was with the historic hydrologic record. We've all heard earlier discussions about whether or not we can rely on that hydrologic record going forward, and I, for one, don't think that we can. So you fast forward to the hydrologic record starting in 2018, that dark line is kind of greenish, I guess, on this screen. And it goes up to double from what it was in 2008, which is really reflective of the elevation of Lake Mead continuing to drop. What's more telling is that red dashed line, and that is using the last essentially 30 years of hydrology, and this probability goes up to 50%. And while we might not be in a crisis now, when you look at risk management, and we heard that question earlier, I think it was from Madeline, about assessing risk. This is assessing risk, and this is a huge risk. So if our future is our last 30 years of hydrology, we have a 1 in 2 chance of the lake essentially getting to a point where it can crash into the mud. And we need to do something about that. And so when I look to the future, I'm looking at several things that need to be put into place. One, the Drought Contingency Plan, the Drought Contingency Plan Plus, an Arizona Conservation Plan, speaking with one voice on Colorado River issues, and of course, embracing Mexico as a full partner in the management of the river And I will go through each one of these a little bit one by one. So again, the drought contingency plan, the purpose of that plan is to restore the probability of Lake Mead going to those low elevations back to the single-digit range that it was in 2008. And to do that, you have this complicated table showing additional reductions under the drought contingency plan, essentially starting at that top row, elevation 1090, versus the first shortage trigger under the guidelines in the second row, starting at 1075. We've circled Arizona. You can see we would start taking additional reductions of 192,000 acre feet at that elevation 1090. When General Manager Ted Cook from CAWCD and myself sat with the lower basin states and worked on this negotiation, I think we agreed that this number 192 was a number that would just largely impact very low priority excess water. And so that was the magic really in that number. But you can see when you add in the additional shortages under the guidelines, you can go down in that column and see how the numbers increase for Arizona all the way down into the last shortage trigger level of 1025. What's most telling and maybe most important about this drought contingency plan as well is if you look at the column for California that's circled, at 1045 they would start taking reductions in their 4.4 million acre feet, even though legally they do not have to. That is a huge give on behalf of the state of California, something we need to have in place when the basin states start to renegotiate the guidelines, which is required by December 31st of 2020. But perhaps we'll start sooner than that, but not before the drought contingency plan is put into place. You look down in the lower right-hand corner, the total reductions under this plan would be 1.2 million acre feet. That is twice the total volume of water that would be conserved or shorted under the 2007 guidelines. We don't yet have Mexico's volumes on this chart, but Mexico basically takes shortages that are in parallel with their 16.67% of the total water that comes out of Lake Mead for use in the lower basin in Mexico. So the fact that we do not have drought contingency plan in place yet means that we right now are losing the opportunity to have 50,000 acre feet of water in Lake Mead from Mexico and from Nevada. CAWCD has left some water in the lake and has done some other conservation and have actually made it so that we're pretty close to the 192 that Arizona would take anyway. So that's helping in that regard, but we're losing other opportunities. So that drought contingency plan creates impacts to water users that they didn't expect to have to suffer based on the 2007 guidelines. And the first set of folks who are impacted are essentially the lowest priority excess water. Right now that's being used by the Groundwater Replenishment District, the Water Banking Authority, and the federal government to do firming for tribes. And then the next set of users that is hurt incrementally is CAP agriculture. And just to describe how that might work, if we go into shortage without the DCP, today CAP agriculture would lose about half its water. With the DCP, they lose it all. Then the next set of users that are impacted are folks in what's called the non-Indian agricultural priority pool. Those are tribes largely who settled their water rights for non-Indian agricultural priority water, but also some cities, especially the city of Phoenix. So Gila River Indian Community, Tohono O'odham Nation, White Mountain Apaches, when their settlement becomes final, and city of Phoenix have way more than half of that NIA water in their portfolios and would be next impacted. But again, what the DCP does is it protects the higher priority uses, municipal and industrial and tribal water. So we had talked in the summer of 2016 and through the fall of 2016 about what morphed into the name, the Drought Contingency Plan Plus, an attempt to partially mitigate the impact on Arizona water users from the additional reductions resulting from the DCP. The first proposal, that was a joint CAWCD DWR proposal, which was, let's try to take care of CAP agriculture to the degree we can. Let's estimate how much they would be incrementally impacted. There were a few tools available to us. It didn't go over well, to say the least. And that morphed into, let's try to protect Lake Mead by keeping it above elevation 1075, thus doing away totally with any impacts on CAP Ag, and find a way then to deal with the other excess pool. So again, over time, different iterations of this plan have been talked about. Right now it's on the table, and I think we've had pretty strong consensus among the stakeholders that we would target a buffer elevation, excuse me for a second. Target having a buffer elevation of 1080 at Lake Mead, using projections from the 24-month study and trying to achieve those conservation goals before the next 24-month study that sets whether or not we are in shortage on January 1 of the following year. As part of that, of course, we need to conserve water, and CAWCD to date has done a good job of conserving water through the Pilot System Conservation Program, through their MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, as well, doing intentionally created surplus, leaving some excess water in the lake, but we need more. We need more than that. And again, the non-tribal intentionally created surplus, so intentionally created surplus is water that you can create, keep it at least temporarily in the lake, take it out at a later point in time, but you do benefit the lake at least temporarily, help prop up the elevations. That pretty much has been done solely by CAWCD in Arizona. It's been done in California and Nevada as well. And Mexico has the ability to do this as well under Minute 323. And then the next element that would be part of the Arizona Conservation Plan would be the ability for tribes to do intentionally created surplus. I don't think there's any disagreement that tribes along the Colorado River who directly divert out of the river have the authority and the ability to do that right now. Where the controversy has arisen is over whether or not tribal entities who have their entitlements delivered by CAWCD through the CAP have that ability to create ICS in their name and store that water temporarily in Lake Mead. And so that's been one of the blocks that have stopped that program from moving forward. The Gila River community is one example of a tribe that has expressed a strong interest in being able to participate in that program. Again, system conservation is another element of the plan. I think we've heard a bit about that before. And then another controversial proposal as part of the Arizona Conservation Plan, that for contractors, and that would include contractors on the river, including those tribes, and tribal users within the Central Arizona Project Service Area who are contractors, that DWR director would have the ability to forbear junior water right users' right to take that water, to make sure that water stays in Lake Mead. In some parts, that's CAWCD who has that right, but there are other entities on the river that at least today have the legal right, even though they have not had the need to take that water quite yet. So we think that is important for the state to be able to have this conservation plan, achieve that goal of propping up Lake Mead, and again, ending up with a solution that has the state make this forbearance decision, because the issue of Lake Mead, the issue of how much water we conserve, is of statewide concern. It includes everyone in the state, if you look at the optics of the view from the outside world onto Arizona, and certainly the water users along the river. We heard earlier the gentleman from Yuma talk about the meeting out there, and we'll talk some more about that later, but clearly those folks out there are concerned that an entity, CAWCD, with an elected board of 15 members from 3 counties, has the ability to make decisions impacting at least the folks on the river, if not the entire state of Arizona. And perhaps it's more appropriate that the state of Arizona the legislature and the governor acting through DWR is the one to be making those decisions for the state as a whole. Moving on quickly to Mexico, and I won't go through this whole slide, but look at the bottom bullet, for example. There are some potential opportunities for binational desalination. There's a work group out of Minute 323 that I am the U.S. co-chair. Sergio Avila from the state of Sonora is the Mexico co-chair. But DWR, CAWCD, Solar Project, and Freeport-McMoRan have funded Black & Veatch, a consultant, to help facilitate the creation of a scope of work. We have a draft scope of work, and we are refining it. We'll probably have it to the oversight group for Minute 323, probably in May or so, with an idea of putting out an RFP for a consultant to do the full-blown study, with that full-blown study perhaps starting in January of 2019. And I think those talks have gone very well. We'll have to wait and see how Mexico's national election impacts these discussions. So another concept that has come up as we have talked with stakeholders about Colorado River issues, and we spent a lot of time in the spring of 2017 reaching out to constituents across the state to hear what their water issues were. Colorado River issues came to the fore, as well as groundwater issues. And we talked about the need for the state to be represented in interstate situations, in international situations, and with the federal government with one voice, a strength of Arizona's success to date. But that some things have happened over the last couple of years that have perhaps bring into question what that one voice is and how unified we are. And the first was this 11th Amendment sovereign immunity issue put forth by CAWCD in some lawsuits, a couple of different lawsuits. Sovereign immunity is an important and powerful tool, basically used to its maximum extent. You could actually stop a lawsuit from moving forward in federal court, even a lawsuit that involved CAWCD, for instance, not delivering someone's water to them. When we were in Yuma, and I think there were close to 300 people in that meeting, and they talked about their concerns about CAWCD on behalf of the replenishment district, potentially transferring water out of Yuma. This was one of their big issues. They're really afraid that this creates a huge unlevel playing field, too much power for CAWCD. The state and DWR have consistently opposed any attempts for CAWCD in court to get 11th Amendment sovereign immunity. The district court the federal district court has ruled they do not have it. We want legislation that settles the issue once and for all. And the legislature has that power to make sure CAWCD cannot use that defense in any federal lawsuit, and that if some judge for some reason does decide they have that power, the legislature would waive their ability to use that immunity. The second item is the concept that the DWR director would sign off and participate with CAWCD on any negotiations that they're involved in agreements on Colorado River water in other states. Again, the one voice, and moving forward in a way that the state of Arizona can protect the state as a whole. And CAWCD's charge is to really look at 3 counties, the CAP service area. And then, of course, the issue that arose in Yuma and we knew was bubbling up, discussions about transfers of main stem Colorado River water into the CAWCD service area. And folks along the river are not just worried about sovereign immunity, they see that as a subset of the larger issue of what they believe is increasing attempts by CAWCD to impose their sovereignty onto those folks along the river. So this is a very divisive issue, and it remains to be seen where that one moves forward. And I will just say, as to the gentleman from Yuma, when he talked about Yuma leasing perhaps water to Las Vegas, and that's not happening. The state has opposed, will oppose, and will continue to oppose any of its Colorado River water moving out of the state to another state, with one exception. That is the Arizona Water Banking Authority is the only entity authorized in this state to do water banking under the guise of water banking and in concert with federal regulations. There can be some movement of water between states. The water bank did store 600,000 plus acre feet for the Southern Nevada Water Authority in the 2000s. Some additional water that's actually Nevada's water is being stored by the water bank this year. And again, one of the benefits of that program will be the creation of about $630,000 or so for the Water Protection Fund. It's state law, CWCD levies an in lieu property tax on Nevada for that water banking, and the Water Protection Fund ends up with that money, which they will end up with, I believe, by July 1st of 2019. So some of those good projects like the wetlands in Yuma might have some money now to continue to do those projects. Real quickly about groundwater challenges. The three poster child counties right now are La Paz, Mojave, and Cochise. You can see in red the water levels, the average water levels dropping. So there's big concern. It's not as big a concern in Mojave County yet, only 1.4 feet, but 3.5 and 3.4 feet in La Paz and Cochise County. Many wells in La Paz County, especially the Mullen Valley Basin, going dry, domestic wells, many wells in the Wilcox Sunside area going dry. Huge concerns by the folks out in those areas. And again, we heard of this as we prepped up for our conversations leading to this legislative session. So we have limited tools for rural Arizona. We need to find a way to incentivize efficiency and conservation there to allow those folks to benefit from that efficiency, to continue to be able to use their water and perhaps slow down the decline of those aquifers. And I said slow down on purpose. You're not going to stop it when groundwater pumping is your sole source of your water supply. For those areas, again, outside the active management areas, there's no requirement to report water use. We had a proposal on the table to do that for larger wells, non-exempt wells. That was another very divisive issue, and it did not make it into any package at the legislature. But I assure you that at least La Paz and Mojave County continue to want to find a path forward to get better data to be able to have DWR do the third bullet, robust groundwater modeling, to kind of help project out what might occur in the future and to test potential solutions that might be crafted as we work with those folks in those areas. And then what I'm calling the Groundwater Management Act Plus, we need to extend management plans for multiple 10-year periods. The concept would include having a stakeholder process to review the conservation requirements in all water-using sectors, also to review the management goals for each AMA. And one thing that came out of, again, the discussions over the summer were the ability for the Water Banking Authority to have recovery authority. Right now that essentially resides with CWCD, but that's an artifact of when we thought the recovered water that the water bank was putting in the ground for CAP water users was going to be project water. In the negotiations of the system use agreement, the Wheeler agreement, it became clear that that recovered water was going to be non-project water. So it doesn't necessarily have to even move through the canal. You lose some of the benefits of having that be project water in terms of cost effectiveness. And so we're really talking about the water bank having a recovery authority to potentially make recovery cheaper, doing things like assigning water bank credits directly to the M&I subcontractor or others who have that firming right, and kind of cutting out the middleman, so to speak, and reducing everyone's costs. In terms of water supply opportunities, and we already heard from Governor Lewis that tribal water settlements created some opportunities there. You talked about the leasing. I've already talked about the need to do tribal ICS. The Colorado Indian tribes have come forth a bit ago and talked about wanting to do some in-state transfers of their water. There's still lots of issues to be worked through there. And I will say that the entire Colorado Indian Tribes Council is up for a recall election because of this water transfer issue. The tribal members, I'm not sure how much they understand it, but you heard Governor Lewis how visceral those issues of water were to those native peoples and all the history there. And so it'll be interesting to see how that recall election plays out. And again, we heard about the marketing of long-term storage credits, another tool that's available to us to move water around. Lastly, I think I'll talk about long-term augmentation and the Governor's Water Augmentation Council, or the GWAC, as you see in parens. There is a long-term water augmentation committee looking at the things in that list: weather mod, watershed management, recharge storage, and other types of augmentation, and in different parts of the state where that's traditionally taking place. We have a desalination committee to look at potential brackish groundwater desal. Bob Lotz from APS is the chair. He's out there somewhere. And then the recycled water committee, and increasing the use of treated effluent, indirect potable reuse, and direct potable reuse. And John Kamik, I see him sitting there, is the chair of that committee. So this is the long-term plan. We'll continue to work on the Governor's Water Augmentation Council as we move forward with those other issues. And then lastly, there was a reference to this earlier, I think maybe the first speaker, about our water use from 1957 through 2016, going slightly down. Economic output and population going consistently up. Whole lot of reasons for this. Ag turning into rooftops, conservation, lots of different programs, either pushed by the state, mandated by the state, individual programs by water providers, more efficiency by farmers, not necessarily regulatory, more efficiency by farmers in Yuma. So I look at that for me as my long-term challenge is, can we remain and push this forward out into subsequent years and continue to grow essentially, and at least have our water use be stable, if not declining. So with that, questions? 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. I'm from Cochise County, one of the red ones. Is the governor seriously entertaining the thought of a statewide AMA?
So that has not been part of our discussion with the stakeholders. We have not talked about imposing a statewide AMA. And from my perspective, I'll say this, that I'm not sure it's going to solve the issue in places like Cochise County. You grandfather in all the existing ag, those domestic wells are still going dry. So something better has to come out, something different has to come out of tools outside of the AMAs. So the AMAs now had the benefit, except for Prescott, of having CAP water coming in ways that really created opportunities for them to do good things. And there's no big project going anywhere around this state that I can foresee, Cochise County especially. There might be some small amounts of water that we could find a way to get there somehow. So we need different tools.